If you ask me, nothing is better in a movie or game than well-done moral ambiguity. Whether it's a decision with no right answer or a character who straddles the line between good and evil, moral ambiguity can add infinitely more depth to the characters and tension to the story. One of my favorite examples of this is LA Confidential with Guy Pearce, Russell Crowe, and Kevin Spacey. Personally, I think this is one of the best movies ever made, and the moral ambiguity is a big reason why. In this movie, just about every named character does some pretty objectively evil things, yet only one of them is wholly evil. I won't say who in case there are some people who still haven't seen the movie. For the sake of catching up anyone who either hasn't seen it or simply doesn't remember it that well, I'll do a quick overview of the characters so we're all on the same page. Jack Vincennes, played by Kevin Spacey, is the definition of a glory hound. He basically rents out his position as a vice detective to a tabloid, taking bribes to stitch up celebrities and local politicians so that said tabloid can get exclusive stories. He is also fully ingrained in his department's culture of corruption, something which actually serves as an inciting incident for the entire movie. Despite these numerous evil and corrupt acts, Jack still has a moral compass, something which becomes unavoidably clear by the end of the movie. He still wants to be the selfless hero that many men dream of being, and ultimately proves willing to die without fear in the service of what is right. Bud White, played by Russell Crowe, is a bit of a Dexter character. By that, I mean he is undeniably evil and corrupt, but he almost exclusively directs that energy at people even worse than himself. He is fully willing to brutalize suspects before even knowing if there is a crime, and he kills an unarmed man in his underwear without a second thought or a hint of remorse. Again, however, he exclusively targets people far worse than himself. Ed Exley, played by Guy Pearce, while he seems like a goody-two-shoes perfect cop, quickly shows himself to be otherwise. He quickly plays into departmental corruption to advance his own career, and by the end of the movie is no different from the other two. The point I ultimately want to make is that in order for a movie to be truly great, rather than just a good time that you forget about shortly after, the characters need to feel human. True moral ambiguity is one of the best ways to achieve that. After all, no one on this earth is 100% good or 100% evil. Just about every saint has a dark past, and that's the entire reason their actions are significant. If someone is pure good, their actions lose a lot of meaning because they don't have to work to accomplish those things because they cannot do anything else. If someone is pure evil, the threat they present is hollow because, again, they cannot do anything else. I would like to go back to a comment I made in my video where war movies go wrong to explain what I mean by a morally ambiguous character, because I have seen a lot of movies attempt moral ambiguity and fail horribly. In short, a morally ambiguous character has to have a clear logical or emotional reason for their actions, something which explains but not necessarily justifies the things they do. For example, back to LA Confidential, there is a scene early on in the movie where Bud White sees a woman with a broken nose sitting in a car with a man who looks like a pimp. His response is to detain and beat the driver and threaten the possible pimp when he doesn't find any hard evidence of what he suspects. This is an obvious abuse of power, and today would be grounds for getting fired at the very least, if not jailed. But you can understand his reasoning for why he thought that was a good idea. The scene certainly looked suspicious, and at this point in the movie, White has already been established as someone who despises woman beaters even more than most of us. Now, a less emotional, more disciplined cop would have likely responded to the situation by following the car and trying to get some hard evidence of what he suspected. This also sets up White as being very emotionally driven, something which becomes an important aspect of his character later in the movie. For an example of the same thing being applied to a villain, let's look at General Bing from We Happy Few. For those who haven't played the game, General Byng is the reason the Germans were able to scare the townsfolk of Wellington Wells into giving up their children. He delivered the material for the Germans to make their papier-mâché Tiger IIs, and is the main enforcer behind Wellington Wells' collective joy addiction. It's never stated anywhere, but given his actions during the war, it is my personal belief that he orchestrated the whole joy thing in the first place. These are all obviously horrible acts, and basically amount to the worst form of treason and treachery imaginable. However, his motivation is understandable. In his mind, his actions during the war helped save the lives of the townspeople, who would have surely attempted to rebel if they had thought the Germans didn't have any armor. He thought it would have been an unnecessary bloodbath that would have ultimately ended in the same place, with a German victory. Maybe he's right, maybe not. The game never gives details about the Germans' strength at the time, specifically to maintain this sort of ambiguity. Regarding his actions post-war, he was simply following the same path of guilt and denial that everyone else in Wellington Wells went through. I've spent a lot of time talking about the right kind of moral ambiguity in media, but I think to get the point across, I need to talk about the negative. I think the best, or rather worst, recent example is Sauron in Rings of Power. Firstly, Sauron's actions are far too evil to allow for moral ambiguity. He wants to control the world for the sake of controlling the world, and will freely kill, manipulate, torture, or any number of other horrible things to achieve his ends. He served under Morgoth, Tolkien's version of Satan. Despite this, Amazon still tried to not only redeem him, but make him a love interest for Galadriel. Sauron has no logical or emotional reason for doing what he does. He was created as an unrelenting supernatural force of evil. He was never meant to be human or humanized. He was meant to be a threat for the heroes to push against. I know I often stand against that sort of character, but I think what made Tolkien such a great writer was the fact that he tackled pretty much every single one of the most difficult tropes to write well, and he still produced multiple masterpieces. He made things as hard on himself as possible, and still accomplished what he did. Still, this video is not about Tolkien or Rings of Power. There are already more than enough videos about both that there is nothing I can say that hasn't already been said. To reiterate my previous point, in order for characters, whether heroes or villains, to feel like real people, there pretty much has to be a degree of moral ambiguity. There are very few exceptions that break this rule while still remaining interesting. Alita Battle Angel is one such exception. Tolkien is another. Alita is pretty much a Mary Sue, and Sauron lacks any sort of moral depth. However, these exceptions are so few that the point still holds. To paraphrase a line from the Amazon show Good Omens, most important deeds happen not by people being fundamentally good or fundamentally evil, but by people being fundamentally people. Pick any person from any part of the world and in any time period. That person has made mistakes. They have done things they shouldn't have. Even some of the worst monsters in history have, directly or indirectly, done some good in their life. Henry Ford changed the face of the automotive industry forever, not to mention several other industries. He was also a literal Nazi. Joseph Stalin killed millions of innocent people through a mixture of incompetence and deliberate attacks. He also turned Russia into an industrial titan unmatched anywhere else in the world. Henry Ford still did far more good than bad in his life, and vice versa for Stalin, but the point is that this is simply the nature of people, and media needs to reflect this fact in order to be engaging. Otherwise, your characters will feel like characters, not people. Thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to let me know if you have any thoughts down in the comments, and if you have any criticism, be sure to let me know. Thank you and have a good day.